by 2030, half of all workers will be in the gig economy. Now, the gig economy effectively is people that don't have day jobs, and portfolio careers arguably is just the top end of the gig economy. So it's more like white-collar version of the gig economy. The pace of change in society, technology, whatever, is insane. So companies really want to have a lower core headcount and have better use of fractional talent because it just allows more flexibility. In a lot of jobs where you used to need a whole person, when they start using AI, you need 70% of person or 30% of person. And then you start saying, well, what do I do with the other third of the person? And the answer might be, let them work for me 3 days a week and they can go do something else the other 2 days. Or it might be you say, I will just hire people for specific jobs as opposed to hire them forever. You want to, I think, A, hedge your bets, and B, maximize your value. And so I think it's kind of criminal in this day and age not to build a personal brand, not to be doing some things on the side.
If you have someone super ambitious who wants to earn a lot of money, what are the most lucrative ways to build portfolio careers? And probably this has something to do with scalability of your portfolio career.
So, and intellectual property, I'd say as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about building a career you love. The topic of today's episode is portfolio careers. What a portfolio career is, why it's great to have one, and how to build it. And I couldn't have a better guest to discuss this topic with than Ben Legg. Ben is a seasoned tech CEO, former CEO of Google Europe, with past experience at McKinsey and Coca-Cola, and right now, Ben is the CEO and co-founder of Portfolio Collective, a company whose mission is to help people launch and grow portfolio careers, and which has over 13,000 members. Ben, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
So let's start with defining what portfolio career is.
So there's a few ways, but at its simplest, you're making money in more than one way. So it might be literally you have a day job and a side hustle, which you could be a DJ at the weekends, you could be a wedding photographer, you could be breeding dogs, but you're starting to make money in more than one way. You could argue that even it starts when you're starting to add value. So if you take that, you're a DJ at the weekends, maybe you start off for free, but you know that when you're good, you're going to start charging. But certainly the moment you've got a second income, you have a portfolio career. So effectively, most people start their portfolio career with a side hustle, as opposed to something dramatic like resigning and saying, I'm going to have a portfolio career. It's more like, I'm going to start making money in multiple ways, and then at some stage, and I'll just keep sort of changing it based on what works and what doesn't.
And can you give me some examples of what types of portfolio careers exist? So you've mentioned there could be several incomes. So what could this look like in practice?
So there's a few ways to cut it. We kind of talk about 4 types of portfolio career, and then I'll give you the examples. But the first type is a side hustler. So basically, you still have the day job, and then you're making money on the side. And obviously, there's so many ways. It could be you have a second home, you rent out on Airbnb. It could be you do some consulting, could be a board job, could be teaching at university. It could be whatever. There's so many ways, types of side hustle. The next stage is often a freelancer. So this is where you don't have the day job and you're pitching for work, but more as a contractor. So, company says, I need someone for a project. You pitch for that work, you get it. The third type is what we call a focused expert, which is you're trying to say, I want to be the best at something so that I can be known as an expert. And it might be you write a book on a subject, or have a blog, you might make speeches on it, you consult on the subject, you sit on the boards of companies that need that knowledge, and you become known for being an expert. We've got experts on all sorts. So for my portfolio career, I'm seen as an expert in 2 things, really. One is the future of advertising. I spent a lot of time working in ad tech, etc. Or the other is the future of work. But for other people, we've got experts in like planning systems or experts in how to turn cities green. So it's almost like you pick your passion as long as someone's prepared to pay and say, I want to be an expert on X. And I'm going to be thoughtful about it, write about it, think about it, do presentations about it. And before you know it, you get a reputation. That's the focused expert. And then the fourth type is almost a mishmash. We call them multi-hyphenates. So they'll say, I want to do lots of different things, and they're not even joined together, and I don't care. We've got people One of our members, just sort of top of my head, his day job, and well, his day job, he's a portfolio professional, but his core revenue comes from being a test pilot for either helicopters or drones. But he's also a beekeeper, and not just any old beekeeper. Like, he's built a whole retreat for beekeeping with courses and books and equipment for sale on Amazon and his own website. We've got a member whose core portfolio career is a lawyer for B Corp organizations, helping companies get B Corp or whatever. But she's also a circus entertainer, and she teaches careers, helps people with their careers at Oxford University. And it's like all sorts of, it's like, I don't care they don't join up. It's just, that's how I want to live my life. So obviously the first three are more joined up. The last one is just, you only live once. I'm just going to do a bunch of things that make me happy.
And I'm hearing more and more that portfolio careers are becoming a bigger and bigger topic. So do you agree with this, and why is this happening?
Yes, it is. And almost any forecast you read, it could be the US government or Harvard or the OECD, say that by 2030, half of all workers will be in the gig economy. Now, the gig economy effectively is people that don't have day jobs. And portfolio careers arguably is just the top end of the gig economy. So it's more like white-collar version of the gig economy. Why are they doing this? Really, it's people want it and companies want it. So if we start with companies, the pace of change in society, technology, whatever, is insane. If you just think about AI alone is changing the way everything happens. But it's not just that. It's, geopolitics is changing really fast. The climate's changing really fast. There's just so many changes. And just more entrepreneurial societies are changing, etc. So if you're a company, do you want to get everything done with full-time employees? Think about a typical full-time employee. It takes 3 to 6 months to justify it, to get it on the budget. Then maybe 3 months to do a search and get someone to accept a job. Then they've got a 3-month notice period. Then a 3-month induction. You've lost 15 months before they start work. How many people do you still need 15 months later? Because everything changes so fast. So companies really want to have a lower core headcount, the people who are employed 52 weeks a year, and have better use of fractional talent because it just allows more flexibility. Good things you can scale up faster with portfolio professionals. Bad things you can scale down faster because you don't have the headcount to fire. Interesting projects you can spin up quickly with flexible talent. So companies want it, but also so do people. So a lot of people have said, kind of corporate careers, a bit like handcuffs, or, it's a bit miserable. Or others are saying, I'm not going to retire till I'm 80 because A, I'm going to be healthy, and B, I won't be able to afford to retire. And so I need to be able to constantly be reinventing myself rather than the traditional thing of you work like crazy till whatever, 60, 65 and retire. It's more like I'm going to work at a slightly slower pace, but for an extra decade or two. And I'm just going to keep reinventing myself. And then to add to that, a lot of people want to work from home, fit around their family, do things that interest them. A lot of people hit a certain age where they say, I'm done with working with assholes, quite frankly. I don't know if you can have that in the video. But it's like, I just want to work with people who are good humans, trying to do good things. And so there's so many reasons. And obviously lockdown accelerated this whole thing because people either got laid off and realized they weren't as valuable to their company as they thought, or maybe just their company wasn't as stable as they thought. Others just had a lot of time to reflect on life, said, kind of like this flexi working, kind of like, being able to take my kids to school. And while we're working remotely, I actually found a client, So it works for people and it works for companies. And so both sides want it. It's going to happen.
And do you think the development of AI is going to accelerate this even more?
For sure, yeah. So there's so many things going on in the future of work, but obviously AI is probably the biggest. If you think about what AI does, it makes everyone more productive, most people more productive. And so that means in a lot of jobs where you used to need a whole person, when they start using AI, you need 70% a person or 30% a person. It depends on what they do. And then you start saying, well, what do I do with the other third of the person? And the answer might be, let them work for me 3 days a week and they can go do something else the other 2 days. So you keep your favorite person, they're more productive, but you only need them 3 days a week. Or it might be you say, do you know what? Things are changing so fast with AI and other technology. I will just hire people for specific jobs as opposed to hire them forever. And that way you can just bring in the right skill set at the right time. So there's all sorts of things. But yeah, AI is changing. Basically, it's changing really dramatically how long it takes to complete stuff or how work gets done. And whenever that happens, org structures need to change. And given that there's sort of dramatic need for a mixture of fractional talent and flexibility, it will accelerate portfolio careers as well.
So even if you imagine you love your full-time job, having a career, would you say it's still worth it kind of having something on the side and thinking about a portfolio career versus doubling down on one thing that you're doing today?
So I think so. If you know you've been singled out to be the CEO of your company in 10 years' time, maybe you're the son of the founder and you've been told, then maybe you do one thing. But for most people, you want to, I think, A, hedge your bets, and B, maximize your value. And so I think it's kind of criminal in this day and age not to build a personal brand, not to be doing some things on the side. Now, they might not necessarily be paid at the beginning, but to build your network beyond your company, to make sure people know what you're up to make sure you codify your skills so that you could do some consulting on the side if you wanted to. But then when you've done that, it's kind of easy to do it. And then, so why wouldn't you? But ultimately, I think saying I'm all into this corporate career and nothing else is very high risk. Because if you get laid off, what's next?
Paradoxically, because corporate careers have the reputation of being safe.
Yeah.
And actually any entrepreneurship has a reputation of being risky.
Yeah. And look, entrepreneurship is risky. Portfolio careers is almost like hedging your bets in lots of ways. Entrepreneurship, like raising a few million to try and change the world, is still risky. But saying I'm going to have 5 clients that pay my bills rather than one employer, I'd argue that's lower risk. Because what's the worst that can happen in a bad month? You lose your biggest client, and maybe that's 30% of your revenue. You still got 70. But not only that, you've built the skills to win clients, and you've built the brand that you start getting inbound opportunities and things like that. Whereas if you get laid off if you've only got one job and you get laid off, how do you know you're going to get another job?
Yeah, and also, what if you have been doing in this job something so specialized that you can't even make it's not that you've been running a business before. You have a specialized skill, so it's not immediately obvious how you would make money on your own without
totally.
the next job.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of monetary things, what type of income range have you seen based on your experience in portfolio careers? Like, how should people think about it?
So there's a few ways to think. If you just start with the big picture, it's like, if you think about it, there are people like Tony Blair or Bill Clinton are portfolio professionals. Now, actually, at the top end of portfolio professionals, you actually have a support team. Like, I actually have a team of 5 for my portfolio career. They're all portfolio professionals. No one's on payroll. But I have a chief of staff, an analyst, researcher, etc. Tony Blair has like 60 people. But in essence, you're kind of saying, I'm a one-man band. I'll win as much work as I can, but I'll hire people to support me. So at the top end of portfolio careers, you can earn millions a year. It's really can be very lucrative. At the bottom end, you're a side hustler working a few hours a week, making maybe an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month, which is kind of nice. It supplements the day job, but it wouldn't pay for all the bills. So there's everything in between. What I would say is there's a bit of a formula for working out how much you should charge, for example, in terms of day rates, let's say. And obviously, a lot of people like to know this. So my normal guidance to people is, if you want to work out what to charge for your work, whatever your work is, the first thing you say is, what would this pay if it was a full-time job? And to keep the maths easy, let's just think a particular job would pay, say, $200,000 a year. So if this is a full-time job, pay $200,000 a year. And then you say, well, there's about 200 working days in the year. So that's about $1,000 a day. So you work out the day rate if it was a full-time job, and then you double it. Why do you double it? Because full-time employees cost a lot more than their salary. There's the cost of recruiting, the cost of onboarding, the cost of their computer, the cost of their office, the cost of their lunch, the cost of their paid time off, the cost of their maternity leave, the cost of, you name it, health insurance. There's all these things that, as a portfolio professional, you don't cost that. There's also flexibility. Full-time employees come with either 30 or 90 days notice. So companies know that. And so as a general rule, whatever you could earn per day in a full-time job, double it. That should be your kind of benchmark. Now, it doesn't mean you always charge that because, maybe there's a client that doesn't have much money. You have to ask for stock options instead. Maybe the client's a lot of money and they're desperate. You can charge a bit more. Maybe you'll do some barter. Say, look, I'll do this for free, but I want something else in return. We've got all sorts of things with our members. You'll say, one person will say, hey, can you do my taxes and I'll build your website? It's a tax efficient way of getting stuff done. It's also kind of fun and collaborative to do things. So there's loads of ways you can charge, but it's always good to know what's my standard day rate. And then if you choose to charge in another way, at least you can say, how does that benchmark versus my standard day rate?
And you've spoken about the spectrum of income. Can you elaborate on it a bit more? If you have someone super ambitious who wants to earn a lot of money, what are the most lucrative ways to build portfolio careers? And probably this has something to do with scalability of your portfolio career.
So, and intellectual property, I'd say as well. So as I say, the top end of portfolio professionals tend to actually be teams. So there are people who can literally win way more work than they can do. And then they outsource some of it to other people who are on lower day rates than them. A very simple example, I do some public speaking and I get paid quite a lot of money per speech, and I don't want to make the slides. I'm happy to do the speech and I'm happy to work out what they want. I don't want to write slides, so I pay someone else to write slides. I will typically pay someone about £1,000 to build my slides. I'll earn a lot more than that for the speech. So in essence, it's a very good amount of money for a 1 hour speech, when I'm actually not even doing all the preparation. So that would be a very simple example, but there's all sorts of stuff. Like, if you think about, let's say, the consulting industry, partners earn a lot more than the doers. So if you're a rainmaker, you can win lots of work and then bring in lots of people on day rates, and then you keep the difference. And if you're going to do a project, and I'll make it up, the project fee is 50 grand, you bring in a bunch of other people to do the work and they earn, 20 grand between them. There's 30 left for the person that won the client. Do you see what I mean? So if you're what we often refer to informally as a rainmaker, then you can make good money. The other thing is, I'd say, is definitely think about intellectual property. So of those four categories, the sort of the focused experts, the ones who are seen as a real deep expert in their subject, they've probably written a book on a subject. They are probably hired to do speeches on a subject. They're asked to sit on boards on a subject. So they build one knowledge base, but then monetize it in multiple different ways. But on top of that, if you're known as the best, clients become a bit price insensitive. They'll say, well, normally for experts, I pay, and different companies have different price points. Let's say normally for experts, I pay £1,000 a day or £2,000 a day. But this person's the best in the world. They want £5,000. Oh, okay, I'll pay. So there's just elements of, if they're really the best, I'll sort of lose my price sensitivity. And there's also, when you have the great personal brands and you're known for being the best at something, you start getting inbound opportunities, and then you can spend less time, let's say, applying for work, because more of it's finding you. So there's definitely a sort of, although all those portfolio career types are valid in different ways for different life stages, etc., if you're very ambitious and want to earn a lot of money, I'd probably say go down that focus expert route and try and be the best at something. And it can be, that's it. It really can be random. But we get people who are like, I don't know, the best at, what would be a good example? Helping UK startups launch in the US. Yeah, that's a great skill set. It could be the best at, I don't know, helping introvert founders be good leaders. It doesn't need to be a really big subject. It just needs to be a subject that resonates with enough people who have money and a need.
And should the skill necessarily come from your previous area of expertise, of your previous full-time job? Or can you kind of discover something maybe that you're passionate about and kind of bring yourself up to speed?
It's a great question. And it's kind of funny. So one of the beauties of portfolio careers, you can do whatever you like, because there's no boss telling you what to do. One of the realities is, especially in the first few years of a portfolio career, you tend to make more money doing the thing you used to do before. So still, and I've had side hustles my whole life, so I've always been a portfolio professional, but I ditched my day job 6 years ago, and I have a very diverse portfolio career, but still about 60% of my earnings comes from being an expert in advertising. Because I spent, 15 years working in advertising. So people kind of say, oh, he was the COO of Google Europe. I'm happy to pay top dollar for that. Whereas with the other things, it's like they can see that I'm valuable, but I have to probably charge a lower rate and hustle a bit more to find that work. So there is an element of it. People that say, I'm done with my old job, I'm going to go and make money in a different way. I'd kind of say, really? Yes, absolutely. If you want to move away, good, you can do it, but maybe make some money from your old knowledge, skill set, your skill set, your knowledge, and your network while you're working out how to monetize the new stuff. And it might take 6 months, it might take 6 years, but one of the nice things about portfolio careers is they're always evolving. So you don't really get these black and white moments. I've stopped doing X, I've started doing Y. It's more like last month I did 80% X and 20% Y. This month it's 70% X and 30% Y. And you're just always evolving. And when I launched my portfolio career, I put 6 things on it. 3 of them never sold. So I just deleted them from the website. No one wanted to buy them. And then you just keep evolving. Well, who am I? What am I selling? Who am I selling it to? What's my credibility? Are there things that aren't working that I should either stop doing or change? Are there things that are starting to find me that I hadn't thought of? One of my parts of my portfolio is lovely. I work with a company called Lapland UK, which is they call it the Glastonbury of Christmas. It's very cool. 17-year-old company founded by a husband and wife who just wanted to make Christmas more magical for their kids, and then they've decided to make it more magical for the whole world. And so it's an entertainment company. Every year they take over a forest just outside of London. They hire about 1,000 people, mostly amateur actors, to dress up as elves and make a magical Christmas experience. I never thought I would be mentoring an entertainment company. I'm a tech guy. But actually, when you look at what it takes to succeed, first of all, a lot of what they do is a construction project. They take over a forest and turn it into the North Pole. A lot of what they do is global growth and marketing. I kind of know that. And they also want to make content to build an e-commerce business, which I understand. What I don't understand is how to build a magical West End show, but they know that. So but that just found me. And so I guess you kind of say, right, I start off saying I want to do lots of mentoring and board roles with tech founders. That's my wheelhouse. But then I started being asked to do mentoring and board roles with companies that aren't tech. And they said, well, you just know how to build a business or how to mentor a CEO. I'd like a fresh perspective. So that's kind of fun. And so again, it comes back to build a skill set, build a brand, and then good things start happening.
Yeah. And it sounds like ideally kind of the next step that you do within portfolio career kind of builds on your previous experience. I mean, of course, if you want to completely turn away from your past, you can do the new thing, but you need time to build brand expertise. You're just not using it in any way. Yeah.
And if I said, I don't know, I'm going to come out of finance and I'm going to say I'm a marketing expert.
Good luck.
It's going to take a while. Yeah. Although if you came out of marketing in finance, then maybe. But it's like you got to sort of think, well, do I have credibility? Because the first thing people do, let's face it, it might be a bad old habit, but they'll go to LinkedIn and say, who did you work for in the past? What were your job titles? So although you don't want to be defined, you just have to accept the reality is people will do that. So how can you explain the transformation you've been through? How can you get some early wins? And so some people early in their portfolio, I talked about you don't always have to make money. You might actually do some stuff for free in return for a review. So I kind of knew when I ditched my day job, actually before I ditched my day job, I thought I want to do more mentoring, more angel investing, and more board roles. And although I had a great career, it was all big organizations. And I kind of thought, what credibility do I have with founders of 10-person companies, And so I just started mentoring founders for free. But they gave me lovely reviews on LinkedIn. And then after a while, some founders said, hey, can you be my mentor? And I just checked their bank balance, said, you've got $5 million in the bank. Yes, here's my fee. And they said, fine.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but I did 3 years of mentoring for free just because I enjoyed it anyway. And it gave me credibility and also knowledge and skills and things. So sometimes you need to sort of the new stuff, work out, maybe do it for free or for a lower fee or for just stock options or something else because you don't have the credibility to charge yet. But do it well, get the reviews, get the reputation, and then at some stage you will be able to charge.
And last monetary question. How long on average does it take for someone to generate like decent income with a portfolio career? What to expect?
So my normal advice is 1 to 2 years. So if you haven't, and we do get people join the Portfolio Collective who have just sold their company or inherited some money or got divorced or whatever, or even just got laid off, but with a big package and said, I'm going to go all in a portfolio career. Well done. It's a really fun thing to do. Most people don't have that luxury. Most people still have a mortgage to pay or school fees or something else. And so what I typically say is, if you can, don't ditch the day job. Drop it down to 4 days a week, probably for 80% of salary. So, drop 20% of your work and what have you. And then in that spare day, start learning new skills, doing work, doing courses, but basically working it out. And if you don't want to do that, you can actually start off evenings and weekends. And then once you've got a little bit of momentum there, then go down to 4 days a week. And then maybe 3 days a week. And then maybe at some stage you ditch the day job. Because the reality is it takes minimum 3 to 6 months to work out, okay, for the next few years of my life, who am I? What am I passionate about? What are my core skills? What am I selling? Who am I selling it to? How do I find them? How am I going to price work? How am I going to get credibility? setting up your company bank account, all of those things. It takes a few months. And then when you come out of that, you'll probably win your first client, but your first client won't pay all the bills. Because typically you need 3 to 5 clients to pay the bills. Some people need 15. It depends on the type of work. And so to get to, let's say 20, 30, if you think about it, let's assume your old job was 40 hours a week. And let's assume in your portfolio career, you can charge twice your old day rate. You only need like 20 hours a week of paid work to earn what you used to earn, simplistically. If you don't count healthcare and other stuff. If you do, then you need to do a bit more. It typically takes, if you don't get lucky, 9 to 12 months to get 20 hours a week of paid work. But as you do get people who literally ditch the old day job, and the next week someone says, oh, you're free. I've got a 5 days a week consulting gig. Do you want it? I'd argue those people actually don't properly build their portfolio because they got lucky, and they often don't do all the serious thinking. And then when that rolls off, that's when they do the serious thinking. But to really get serious about it, I'd say 9 to 12 months is about the norm. If it might take 2 years. And so if you can slowly wind down the day job, that's better.
And let's now move to the part where we talk about how to build a portfolio career. Maybe we can start with, can you please describe Portfolio Collective and how it helps others to build portfolio careers?
Sure. So maybe I can talk about why I found it, because I almost found it by accident at the beginning. So I had a portfolio career, as a kind of my whole life side hustles, but I ditched my day job in 2019. And I didn't know what I was launching as a portfolio career, but I knew I didn't want a day job. I wanted to spin up my side hustles into a career. So, and there's 2 big buckets of my portfolio career and a bunch of small ones. The big bucket number 1 is sort of mentoring and board roles with typically founders or very entrepreneurial CEOs. The second is working with investors in various ways, but mainly educating investors on what's going on in big tech. Ever since I left Google, I've been keeping a lot of tentacles all over the place as to what's going on, what's working, not working, who's winning, losing, etc. And I work with investors on helping them understand that. So they're my 2 bits. And there's a bunch of other random stuff. I teach a bit at Oxford University and that kind of thing. So I did that stuff and didn't know it's called a portfolio career. Didn't know where I was headed. And I thought probably I'll be maybe like a super angel one day. So in year 1, I made a few angel investments and I picked up some sweat equity, so some stock options in companies I was working with. And it was 8 companies. And I thought, wow, 8 companies in year 1. By year 3, I might have 20 companies or 30. Maybe I look like those super angels with lots of stakes in lots of startups. But I didn't get there because what happened is lockdown began 1 year into my portfolio career. And the Great Resignation kicked off. And it seems like half my friends wanted portfolio careers. And they came to me as if I was an expert. I wasn't. I mean, I did have one. I didn't even know I had a portfolio career. I did. And they said, Ben, either I've been laid off or I'm planning to quit or I've been reflecting on life. Your career looks kind of cool. How do I do that? And I gave pretty lousy advice because I was winging it, basically. So they'd have really good questions like, how do I build a personal brand? I thought, I know what I do, but I have no idea what anyone else does, and I don't know if it's best practice. What's best practice for networking on LinkedIn? I know what I do, but I'm probably missing some tricks. Should I have a website? I've got one, but not sure it's very helpful. What should I charge for my day rate? I mean, I've got a day rate, but I made it up. So I couldn't give good advice. But not only that, there was so much demand. I was spending like 20 hours a week giving career advice to friends. And so I had 2 big problems. 20 hours a week giving career advice, that was a real time sink, and I love productivity. But also, I was just giving mediocre advice because I hadn't really thought it through myself. So I thought I'd solve both problems with one solution. And I said, I'm going to launch a weekly workshop called the Portfolio Career Workshop. So one of my friends, I forget who, I wish I knew because I could thank them, said, you've got a portfolio career. And I looked it up and said, oh yeah, that's a nice name. So I adopted portfolio career as a name. So we didn't make it up. We kind of own it now, which is nice. And so I launched this portfolio career workshop. And that way, if anyone said, Ben, can I pick your brain? Say, sure, here's a link, see you Wednesday. So it cleaned up my calendar. And I thought, I'm going to make some slides. I'm going to do some research. So I went and interviewed 30-something portfolio professionals. And like wildly successful, those ones with the small teams, and then, starting out and in between. And I asked them all these questions. I had 75 questions that people had asked me. And I structured all their answers into the 8 steps of launching a portfolio career. And that's really what the Portfolio Collective started out as, was just a workshop, not branded Portfolio Collective. It was just a workshop to help my friends launch portfolio careers. And it's great content. It still is the foundation of a lot of what we do, is how to launch a portfolio career. So that was it. I thought I'd just do it. In my mind, it's like, I've cleaned up my calendar. I'm helping my friends. I can get on with my life. And by then I knew my life was called a portfolio career. That's kind of nice. That was it. But then this thing got a life of its own. So what would happen is, week 1 was like 15 people in the workshop. By week 3, it was like 50. So it just kept growing. People kept telling their friends, oh, this is a great workshop, come along. And I was thinking, this is cool. It's still only a 1 hour a week. I don't care how many people come, great. I'm helping more people, still 1 hour a week. But then they'd come to this workshop, and I got them to introduce themselves in chat, because there were too many people to introduce verbally. And you get people come along saying, yeah, I was a general in the army. Now I sit on 5 boards focused on green energy. I think I'm a lousy board member because I don't understand the P&L. Someone else come along. I'm an academic at Oxford. Academic pay is rubbish, so I do consulting on the side. I don't think I'm a very good consultant. I've got a skills gap. Someone else come along. I was the chief designer of shoes at Timberland. I want to be an independent designer. I don't know how to run a company. And so you had all these like really impressive people. You could tell they can add value to society, but they didn't know how to be a portfolio professional. But what was lovely is, after those calls, people would ping me and say, hey, Ben, can you connect with that general? I'm a fractional CFO. I'll teach him about the P&L if he teaches me about green energy. Someone else came along, Ben, I used to be an architect in a big firm. Now I design treehouse offices, obviously a great thing to do during lockdown. Can you connect with that shoe designer? I think actually architects and shoe designers have a lot in common. We can swap notes. And it just went on and on like that. And what I realized is we needed a community where all these people help each other, because otherwise I was the bottleneck. I had a few hundred names and email addresses in a Google Sheet. That was it. That was how unsophisticated it was. But then it's like with GDPR and stuff, you can't just share all those emails. So I thought, well, how do you just build a community where all these people can help each other and hire each other without me being in the way? So those were the first few weeks of the Portfolio Collective. And then at some stage I said, right, I'm in. I had my angel investing money. I thought I'll invest in my own thing for a change. Found a co-founder, Fiona. We started building in early lockdown. We started about June-ish of 2020. And what are we now? We have 14,000 members around the world. We don't do marketing. So in essence, all the growth has been word of mouth, SEO. So we have lots of great content, and kind of we hustle a lot on LinkedIn. That's it. But mostly word of mouth. It's over 50% of our signups are word of mouth. You heard about us through word of mouth. And what do? First and foremost, we're building a community of portfolio professionals who help each other. They help each other, they hire each other, they learn from each other. There's a real sort of bond of trust. I mean, portfolio careers can be hard and lonely. We make them less hard and less lonely. You've got a backup team. There's any problem. Post it in the newsfeed. 5 friendly people will say, hey, fancy a coffee. It's just really nice. So that's at the core. And then we, the Portfolio Collective team, we layer on courses and content and events and other things to make it even more coherent. And then in parallel, but much smaller for us, is because we've been building a brand around the Portfolio Collective and our talent, we get a lot of inbound requests from companies saying, can you find me a board member? Can you find me a mentor? Can you find me a fractional CFO? Can you find me someone to help launch in the US? Whatever it might be, all sorts of problems. And we've always got great talent for that too. So we don't want to be seen as a jobs board or a consultancy firm. There are a lot of those out there, but those organizations almost always focus on the client. And we made a choice being we focus on the member. And if you think about it, how do we help our members? It's not just by having more clients. We've only served about 50 clients, directly, the ones that I know of, in our 4 years. And with 14,000 members, there's not enough work. But it doesn't matter, because less than 20% of fractional work ever sees a job description. So here's the thing, especially at the top end of the gig economy, which portfolio professionals are, you get people, it's typically either a company or maybe a portfolio professional serving a company. They have a problem. They don't understand the problem, so they can't write a job description because they don't understand it. So what do they need? They need to find an expert to have a coffee. Literally, it's like that. And then they have the coffee, say, okay, I've got this problem. Am I describing it right? No, actually, you need to look at it like this instead, or solve it like that. How would I solve it? Well, there's 3 or 4 ways to solve it. What's your budget? What's your timeline? How much does it matter? And you start problem solving. Literally, coffee. In my case, I love walking meetings, so I did a lot of those. but walking meetings, coffee, could be beer, whatever, Zoom, doesn't really matter. But you start having chats, and from that, good things happen. Most of them don't go anywhere straight away. Some of them turn straight into a paid gig. Others, you get a call 6 months later. Hey, I've been thinking about the conversation. Have you got some time? I need you, or my friend needs you. And so it's very organic, which is actually very human, which is nice. And we just say, right, okay, guys, we're going to help you work out that whole thing of who are you, what are you selling, who are you selling to build a personal brand, to know how to network, and then to make sure there's just a steady flow of smart people with problems to solve, and then connect you all in ways, and you go off and have a wonderful life.
That's amazing. And could we touch upon these 8 steps that we've mentioned around how to start a portfolio career?
Sure. So I've probably mentioned a few, and I'll try and remember them. This is where it's like, oh, cracky. It's a long time since I wrote the course, but I think I can get it. I've got a new course starting this week, so I need to remember because I'm teaching it. But step 1 is along the lines of define your monetizable skills. So it's kind of funny. A lot of people, especially if they've come out of a big corporate, like 30 years in a big corporate thing, I've got nothing to sell. And there's a process you go through and you end up thinking, oh, there's 20 or 30 ways I could make money. And it's a mixture of skills you've learned in the past, skills you've learned in your life, not necessarily in your job, passions that you could turn into a skill, things that people have asked for help for, which you don't think of as a skill. And actually, a lot of people, their deepest skills, they don't even realize the skills because they think everyone else has the same skill. And they don't. Often people who are highly numerate or good at spreadsheets think everyone else is good at spreadsheets. Yeah, they're not. So actually, that's a skill. But you sort of you work out this long list of skills, and you start and passions. It's not just skills. It's skills. It's passions. It's knowledge. It's network. It's really like looking at your assets. But most of your assets are knowledge or skills. But it might be your network. It might be your personal brand if you already have it, etc. Then. The module 2 is how do you turn that? You need to do some prioritization here. So how do you pick typically 2 or 3 rather than 1 and turn it into an offering? And then we help you work out, your elevator pitch. How are you going to explain yourself to the world or to new clients, etc. Module 3 is then personal branding, which matters enormously. How are you going to build your personal brand? Because if no one knows you've got that skill, it doesn't exist. So you need to work out, how am I going to build that brand? Module 4, really practical. It's all about LinkedIn. What are you going to say on LinkedIn? What are you going to put in your profile? Because it just matters so much. Obviously, for a few people, maybe Instagram matters more, but for most of our members, B2B, their clients are companies, B2B. LinkedIn is where it happens. Module 5 is then the rest of your online presence, which typically either means what are you going to put in your profile with the Portfolio Collective, or what are you going to put in your website? But you can pick other sites. There are a lot of sites where you can build a profile. Module 6 is actual sales. How are you going to outreach and build a funnel to actually have real opportunities coming your way? Module 7, I think, is pitching and pricing. What do you put in a pitch and how do you price your services, that kind of thing. And then module 8 is a mixture of sort of execution and finance. So in essence, those 8 steps are very much designed to help you win your first client. What we're going to build as the next course that comes along is more like, how do you then dazzle your clients so that you get upsell, cross-sell, and referrals. So we haven't built that yet. But the first one, how to launch, we're there. And then we have a third course, which almost comes in later. We haven't built number 2. We've built number 1 and 3. Our third course is a mentor program that helps people who want to be board members, trusted advisors, mentors, working with CEOs or C-level leaders, which has been going for a couple of years now, and that's really cool too. So our plan is to have 3 courses: how to launch a portfolio career, how to dazzle clients, and then how to be a trusted advisor of C-level execs. And then there's a lot of other things that our members do that we don't provide, but our members are often doing coaching courses, AI courses, crypto courses, whatever it might be. There's all sorts of other courses that we don't provide, but in essence, we help our members find them. Because there's thousands of courses out there, and I think with a portfolio career, you've got no company to pay for your training anymore, so you need to work out. You should have a training budget, and obviously you can do a lot of learning on the job and for free stuff on the internet. But most successful portfolio professionals do spend meaningful money on a mixture of training, personal branding, networking, travel, just to sort of learn, get the word out there, etc.
And it's so interesting. You've mentioned that a lot of people are not sure what skill could be monetizable, and I bet there is almost like this nuance between the two professions, types of professionals that go into portfolio careers. Some professionals may have something that's super transferable,
Yeah.
like if you're a digital marketer
Yeah.
or a strategy person,
Yeah.
like you can easily convert this into like your side gig.
Yeah.
But some people may be doing something that's super specialized
Yeah.
on the industry that they've been working on
Yeah.
before. So I think it's super relevant for these people that there is a chance to monetize something
Yeah.
with their background, you know?
Yeah, there is, and it might take more thinking. I'm just thinking of one of our members. He's actually one of our investors too, because we're owned by our community, by the way. So we've got 250 community members who have invested in the Portfolio Collective. One of our members has spent 30-something years helping telecoms companies have consistent standards so they're interoperable. That's pretty niche.
Yeah.
and it sounds very big company, but he's making it work because he's saying, well, if I'm going to be I can be an independent consultant and I can connect telecoms companies with each other, and I'm the fair guy because I'm not working for one of them. And so he's changed the paradigm of how that work happens. It used to be one of maybe the bigger telco would say, we'll take the lead. And he's saying, how about you all subsidize me and I'll help you all work together. So it's like you really can sort of find quite quirky niches or turn what really sounds like big company, stuff into niches.
Yeah. And can you elaborate on this super valuable skill that you've mentioned, which is around LinkedIn presence?
Yeah.
Why is it so important? And what are, I guess, the best tips and tricks that people need to be aware of when working with this platform?
Yeah, we could talk for hours just on LinkedIn, but let's start with, again, how work happens, as it were. So if we take that, and we've done lots of surveys, and I read everyone else's surveys too, but less than 20% of fractional work ever sees a job description. That means 80% happen informally. So it's people going to friends, former colleagues, or often asking a friend, do you know anyone who's any good at X? And so for that, what do you need to do as a portfolio professional? You need all the people that know you and love you, which is a small group, but you need your former colleagues, friends, neighbors, people you're on courses with, whatever. They need to know your skill set. And then you also need to make sure that your online presence tells your story really clearly. And that's not like, here's what I've done for the last 20 years, blow by blow. Although that might give you credibility, it doesn't tell people, are you useful now? So the key thing with not just LinkedIn, but whether it's your own website, your portfolio collective profile, whatever, is to say, what problems do you solve? Or what opportunities do you help people capture? Because when people are looking for a portfolio professional, they don't even know what type of person they're looking. They know the problem they want someone to help them solve. So the more in your brand you can talk about the problem you solve, the better. Now, why does LinkedIn matter? Because everyone's on it. And even people that aren't on it very often, when they want to check you out, they'll typically go to LinkedIn. And even if they go to Google, Google will go to LinkedIn. So again, unless you're an influencer on Instagram or TikTok or something, where, so occasionally other things matter. But most portfolio professionals, certainly in our world, are like selling to companies, etc. And so even if, let's say, for example, you said to me, Ben, can you recommend someone who's really good at X, whatever? You came to me and said, I want someone who's a real podcast expert because I want to go global. And I'd think about it, and I'd probably look on LinkedIn, I'd look on the Portfolio Collective too, and I'd send you a person. But what would I do? I'd send you a link. It's just what people do.
Yep.
And then you would read that link. You wouldn't just say, thanks, Ben, I totally trust you, I'll take the meeting. You'd actually say, let me just double check that Ben understood the brief. And then you check them out, and then you say, actually, yeah, thanks, please make the intro, or I'd love a meeting. And so there's different reasons for an online presence. I think too many people think their online presence will just naturally bring inbound leads. You build an amazing LinkedIn profile or website, and suddenly people are, your phone doesn't stop ringing because of your amazing profile. That hardly ever happens. Opportunities come from your networking, your friends of friends, etc. But you don't get them over the line unless your online presence is very credible.
And I know there are tons of tips and tricks we can talk about around the best practices of building portfolio careers. But apart from LinkedIn, what else would you highlight as the key ways to grow the business in this format? Yeah.
So if you're talking about other places to have an online profile, it depends on what you do. I'm probably the king of online profiles. I've got about 30 online profiles. Now, it's partly the nature of the work I do. So some of my work, the work I do with investors, typically comes to me through what's called expert networks. And so these are often networks where investors want to talk to industry experts. So unfortunately, it's a very fragmented industry. I found about 15 of them, so I've signed up with all 15. But because I know what I want trying to say, I can fill out an online profile on any of those sites in about half an hour. So I thought, why not do it? In that case, all 15 of them have generated work. So none of them were wasted time. But I didn't know that. I just thought, this company sounds credible. I could research them for hours before I fill out a profile. I can just fill out a profile. I'll just fill out a profile. And it works. The issue then is, because your skill set keeps changing, I have to update them all about once every 6 months. But I do. The other, then there's another one. So I do a bit of public speaking. Some of that just comes inbound through referrals, but some of it comes through speaker bureaus. I've found, I think now 9 speaker bureaus, where people organizing conferences, they go to a speaker bureau and say, can you find me a speaker? Of the 9 I signed up with, only 2 have ever given me any work. I didn't know which 2 though. So I just signed up with 9. So maybe I wasted, a few hours, but again, it doesn't worry me. It's like the ones that never bring me work, I probably won't update my profile. The ones that do, I'll polish it. And then obviously I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm very active on the Portfolio Collective, where we have, all our members have profiles and they're beautiful. There's a site called New Role, which is focused on board jobs. I have a profile there. It's actually very out of date. But there's a few. But if, for example, if let's say you're more junior, you're a freelancer in marketing, there's other websites for freelancers in marketing. Or if you're a part-time CFO, there's websites for that. So if in doubt, what I say to people is, imagine you are your dream client. Go to Google and search for that skill set, see what crops up. It's typically companies, not people, and fill out a profile with all the things that you see on Google. So let's say you are a fractional CFO. So you're a part-time CFO. That's what you do. Just search fractional CFO in Google. You'll see a bunch of sites that say, we have lots of fractional CFOs. Build a profile with all of them. Most of them are free. If they're paid, you need to think twice. There are some sharks out there. But if they're free, just fill out a profile. It takes half an hour. And if it doesn't take half an hour, then you don't know who you are. So actually do the thinking about who you are and what you're offering.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap up, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone who wants to build a portfolio career, what would this be?
Take it seriously. It's not easy. It's easy to look at the people who are successful and say, wow, what a lovely life. They're all hustling. You're not doing it because you want an easy life, or if you are, maybe you need to really think twice, because it's not easy. But you're doing it because you're saying, this is something I want to do for a decade or more. Sometimes 3 decades, depends how old you are. You take your career seriously. You say, I really need to work out who I am, what I'm selling, who I'm telling. I need to keep up, improving my skills. I need to keep improving my network. I need to keep hustling. And if you do that, it will work. It always does, because you're constantly thinking, right, I'll do a bit more of this and a bit less of that, and you're just hustling and evolving. And in the end, it all works. And if you don't know, where to look for help, join the Portfolio Collective. We love helping people.
Super. And where can people find Portfolio Collective? And also, what other resources apart from Portfolio Collective would you absolutely recommend to check out?
So to find the Portfolio Collective, you literally Google the Portfolio Collective, or even Google what is a portfolio career. Our SEO is very good, so we appear in all the right places. Beyond that, I would absolutely recommend taking LinkedIn very seriously. Your profile, and just a bit of getting out there, chatting to people, posting, that kind of thing. Beyond that, it does depend on what you want to do, but I'd say there's a lot of really useful software that stops you getting bogged down in nitty-gritty. So, for example, most portfolio professionals have things like Calendly, so it just makes it ridiculously easy to organize meetings. An awful lot have Superhuman. It makes it easier to manage your email. So there's a lot of productivity software that stops you getting bogged down, even like just for doing your expenses. Like, I probably go to the extreme. I spend about $300 a month on software because I'm an efficiency nut. But you probably need to spend $100 a month just so that you're spending your time working on the business, working with clients, and networking, and not doing the admin. The admin doesn't bring in the money. So streamline the admin as best you can, so that you're focused on the stuff that matters.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much for being here with me today, and thank you for doing the work that you do. I'm sure you're making a lot of impact on people's lives.
I am, and I love it too.